Welcome to the D.E.A.D podcast, where I discuss all things spooky and weird. I am Desi, and today I'll be talking about the Hat Man. Let's get started. Hey everyone, how's everyone doing tonight? I hope y'all are doing good. Tonight I am drinking a beer, and it is from the Nueces Brewing Company, which is locally here where I live, and it's really good. I'm not sure if I've had it before on the podcast, but it's very good. And I am wearing a very special shirt tonight. It is La Llorona, and I'm so excited. I got it, it's new. And I got it from the Decayed Mind Clothing. You should definitely go check them out. They're on Instagram. I will put a link to the website in the show notes. He should be coming out with more La Llorona t-shirts, and also a bunch of new images for Halloween are coming. So I am super excited about that. The shipping was pretty fast. I love it. So I can't wait to get more. So make sure y'all check it out. And tonight we're going to be talking about the Hat Man. So let's get started. Tales of things that go bump in the night are often met with skepticism. But one nightmarish figure keeps popping up in reports from all around the world. Since the late 2000s, posters on social media and online message boards have been sharing their experiences of waking in the dark to find a shadowy figure dubbed the Hat Man looming over them. The phenomenon has attracted widespread attention, inspiring documentaries, and the launch of a dedicated blog, the Hat Man Project, where people can share their experiences. You may not have heard of the Hat Man, but there's a chance he's found his way into your dreams once or twice. A spooky, shadowy figure, often described as wearing a dark coat and a hat. The Hat Man is reported to appear in bedrooms when people are falling asleep or first waking up. The Hat Man has officially become sleep paralysis lore and has been reported as being seen in that not awake, not asleep state all around the world. A note that has left many scientists scratching their heads. Sleep paralysis is a state in which the line between sleep and wakefulness is blurred, so a person starts to become aware of their surroundings but is still in a state of temporary paralysis called muscle atonia, which the body goes into during rapid eye movement REM sleep to protect us from acting out our dreams. Pinpointing the cause of sleep paralysis is tricky. Family history, stress levels, substance abuse, and certain mental and physical health conditions appear to correlate with a higher likelihood of experiencing sleep paralysis, according to Science magazine Discover. Sleep paralysis can also be a side effect of medication, including SSRS, tricyclic antidepressants, anticholinesterase inhibitors, beta blockers, and sleep medications. 1 in 5 people have an episode of sleep paralysis at least occasionally, according to the Seattle-based Sleep Foundation, and accompanying hallucinations are very common. These are often informally referred to by sufferers as sleep paralysis demons. While the exact cause of hallucinations, like the Hat Man, are unknown, experts believe they occur when people experience the vivid dreams of REM sleep while they are awake. Some say the figure of the Hat Man may be subconscious reworkings of figures from popular culture, including popular horror films in recent times. Christopher French, a psychology professor at Goldsmiths, University of London, said the first thing that came to mind when he thought about the Hat Man was Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street. This notion that you can be attacked when you're asleep, That's when you're vulnerable. And, of course, Kruger wears a hat. For centuries, cultures across the world have attributed these hallucinations to black magic, mythical monsters, even paranormal activity. People who fear supernatural demons in the night are more likely to experience the phenomenon again. It appears that the more people fear sleep paralysis, the more they experience it, and the stronger its effects are. Accompanied by a belief in the paranormal, sleep paralysis can therefore be not just frightening, but potentially traumatizing. The human mind is vastly more mysterious and occasionally malevolent than one would have thought. While doctors have some understanding of how the condition occurs, sleep paralysis still remains something of a mystery, which means there is no single cure. During an episode, sufferers should focus on breathing and awareness and try to initiate movement with a small muscle like a finger or toe. This small action can help bring an end to the paralysis episode. In the long term, stress and trauma appear to be contributing factors, and there is evidence that meditation and relaxation can help reduce the chances. In one study, participants who used those techniques cut the number of episodes they experience by more than a half, and hallucinations by more than one third. The Hat Man is said to be an evil entity, often placed in the category of paranormal phenomena referred to as shadow people. Shadow people are just about exactly what they sound like: dark, vaporous forms in the shape of humans that are posited to be a type of ghost. Some might be dilute manifestations of people who were once living. Others may be something else that we don't understand. But the Hat Man is a singular character inside that broader category, reported to have particular character traits, a more solid outline than most shadow people, and an especially notable visual marker: he's always wearing a hat. That's not to say he doesn't change up his style every now and again. Some people report encountering the Hat Man in old-timey clothes, a long trench coat or cape, and various hats, usually a top hat, fedora, or a gaucho hat. Think Southwestern cowboy. Some have seen him with red eyes. Others report a featureless, dark face. Some people claim he carries a golden pocket watch or is mist-like rather than a solid figure. But he's always tall, 6 feet at minimum, and even more often, people say he's about 8 to 10 feet tall, forcing him to crouch while standing. He's also eerily quiet. He doesn't touch you, try to attack you, or sit on your chest like other sleep paralysis demons are known to do. Imagine opening your eyes at night and seeing a hunched figure bending unnaturally away to keep from hitting your ceiling fan with the top of his hat. Such a human action on an unhuman figure has to be especially eerie. Luckily for most who meet him, the Hat Man doesn't seem intent on inflicting physical harm. What he's actually after is slower, more insidious. He just watches the sleeper, sometimes arching his overlong body over their bed. It is said that even though he doesn't touch his victims, they can feel evil emanating from him in waves. They can feel that he wants to do them harm. The theory is that he uses a look, don't touch approach for a calculated reason. It creates a heady brew of confusion, anticipation, and fear in his subject that he can then feed off of. This may be the main purpose of the Hat Man's visit. The bedrooms of his victims are his demonic charging stations. When he's not hovering over the sleeper, He employs two other common methods of viewing his prey: looking at the sleeper through the mirror, or sitting and watching them from the corner. Even though proximity would understandably cause the most fear, I find these two approaches almost more disconcerting. Are there sometimes otherworldly confines he's working with that force him to use a secondary source, the mirror, to watch his victims? Or is it somehow amplifying his gaze? Is his malevolence so innate and casual that he sometimes doesn't even have to get up, preferring to take a load off in the corner? When he finally had his fill of fear and decides to leave by actually using the door and either walking or gliding through it. This suggests a degree of physical control other shadow people may not have, perhaps due to the more solid outline that those who have encountered the Hat Man have remarked on. He can appear to anyone at any time, but the pattern seems to be that the Hat Man often comes around people who are in turmoil, not unlike the appearance of poltergeists who feed off the strong energy of those in distress in order to manifest. Now I'm going to be reading to you 3 supposed encounters with the Hat Man. The first one: I saw the Hat Man. I was just informed that the man I saw during my sleep might have been the Hat Man. I'll tell you about my dream first. I live in a small college dorm room. My roommate and I both have lofted beds on either side of the room. One night, last semester, during the fall, after a night full of dreaming, I woke up at about 5 in the morning. I was facing away from the wall, where I saw a man in a black suit and a fedora just standing facing the corner of the room. I immediately froze. He was just standing there, completely still. He had to have been pretty tall, because I saw a good portion of him from my lofted bed. After staring for what seemed like forever, he quickly turned his head all the way around and looked directly at me. Well, I'm pretty sure he did. He had no face. It was at this point, I assume, I really woke up. Except, I don't remember waking up. I just remember flinching at his sudden movement and turning to face the wall, becoming completely paralyzed with fear. Normally, when I have a nightmare, the effect of the dream wears off, and I can go back to sleep pretty quickly. But I was so terrified, I couldn't imagine going back to sleep. After about half an hour of not being able to calm down and convince myself that there wasn't still a tall man in a suit behind me, I slid my hand under my pillow to get my phone and call my partner. They answered after the ringing apparently woke them up, and I told them what had just happened, still terrified. They helped me relax just enough to go back to sleep. But when my alarm for my 8 o'clock class woke me up at 7, I was still so scared to turn around that I skipped class completely. Whatever happened, whether it was a dream or not, was so vivid it kept me in bed until the sun came up and my roommate convinced me that there was no one else in the room. After that, I told anyone who asked about it that it was the worst nightmare I've ever had. Today, I entered a conversation about dreams with a group of my friends. When I told the story, a friend of mine quietly said, "You saw the Hat Man." I was confused, so I asked who he was. My friend went on to explain that the fact that I didn't previously know of the Hat Man means it was more likely that I actually saw him. They explained that the Hat Man is said to be an entity who often appears to people, most commonly children, in sleep paralysis and nightmares. He is seen wearing either a black top hat or fedora and has no face. When he appears, he just stands still. He might move just slightly before disappearing. There are no instances I've found where he has caused anyone harm, but it is still so scary that someone who I saw in my room has visited so many other people. Encounter number 2, the Hat Man. It was October 31st, 2009. It had been a cool day, leaves turning color, the perfect season. Soccer had just gone out, the fresh taste of Kool-Aid still in my mouth. I was ecstatic for the reason my mom was letting me stay at my friend Tyler's house on Halloween. Tyler was a goalkeeper of our team, and we had become close friends through the years. I distinctly remember his house. It was cozy, but at the time it had a dark and mysterious feeling to it. We began to bring my overnight clothes in when Tyler looked at me with a distressed look. He said, "There is something I have to tell you about before entering my house." I looked at him with a joking grin, expecting him to crack a Halloween satire. I give the typical 11-year-old response. "What, Tyler, is your house haunted?" He laughed for a brief second, but then it disappeared just as fast. "No," he replied, "but don't mention God or Christianity around my mom." Shocked, I responded how any Bible Belt child would, with a disgruntled look, but politely said, "Of course." After getting settled, Tyler and I did the typical Halloween gimmick. We went and watched scary videos and movies on his computer upstairs. I distinctly remember the classic hill horror video that was popular at the time. The car drives down the hill and disappears behind trees. Then, boom, a scary monster pops up on the screen. Being overly dramatic, I fell out of my chair and screamed. My heart racing, I yelled at Tyler, "What the heck, man? What was that?" Tyler, with tears of laughter rolling down his eyes, says, "I got you, man." I settled down and began to laugh with him. One of the things I remember most about his house was all the bobbleheads. When I asked his dad about all of them, it got deeper than I expected. He explains that during the middle of the night, all of the bobbleheads go off at the same time. Being the young, gullible kid I was, I soaked it all in. He then tells me that the window that was in their laundry room will open and shut by itself. I remember, at that point, being frightened, but that was nothing compared to what would come. As we got hunkered into bed and began watching the World Series, Tyler and I stayed up and talked about life that we had as 11-year-olds. We talked about all the cute girls we knew and how we never got the courage to actually talk to them. As the night went on, we slowly began to fall asleep. During the night, I remember waking up. It was the middle of the night, around 2 o'clock. I remember not being able to move, feeling as if I was paralyzed. I turned my head to see if Tyler was sleeping. He was. When I looked back, I saw something I will never forget. It was a man dressed in all black. The most distinct part about him was his hat. He just stood on the wall over me. I began to panic, thinking to myself, "This is a dream. It has to be a dream." It wasn't a dream. It was a nightmare. He wouldn't go away. He just stood there, as if he was paralyzed too. I just closed my eyes and counted sheep. Eventually, I was able to fall back to sleep and slept through the night. I woke up the next morning, reluctant to tell him, my childhood friend, of the horror that bestowed upon me. But before I could say anything, Tyler began to tell me about a nightmare he had. The nightmare was nothing I would have ever expected. He began to explain the dream to me. We were all sleeping. A man in a black suit with a hat came and killed everyone in the house but you. Shocked and in disbelief, I couldn't even utter the word Besides, I want to go home. I never went back to Tyler's house, and he stopped showing up to practice. After that night, we never spoke again. But I won't ever forget the entity I will always describe as the Hat Man. The third and final encounter. The Hat Man is real. I can't explain to you guys how many times I have typed this experience out and then either not finished or deleted it. I remember every detail as if it was yesterday. This experience freaks me out even to this day, and knowing that it's real brings tears to my eyes. I am 21 years old now, and I just found out the Hat Man is real. When I was around 12 years old, my home environment wasn't the best. It was violent, and I was emotionally abused on the daily. My parents were dealing with financial problems. My mom was going through early onset menopause, and my dad was so stressed that he was drinking every night. Me and my siblings were never physically abused to the point to where you could call it physical abuse, but our mom would have violent outbursts and treat us like we weren't her children. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's the only way I can explain what these episodes were. My mom was mainly emotionally and verbally abusive, and my dad was only around long enough to punch holes in the walls and yell. Anyways, let's just say that my parents are the ones who created me and brought me into this world, but they have never felt like my mom and dad. I didn't have any answers for years because when I was 12, it was the early 2000s and computers and the internet were fairly new, and my family still only had a dial up. I saw the Hat Man in a dream. In my dream, I woke up in my bedroom. In my dream, my door was open and the hall light was on. I got out of bed and walked into the hallway. I turned the corner and walked down a bit. When I got to the middle of the hallway, that's when I saw him. He was a tall black figure, probably around 6'2" or 6'5". He wore a top hat and had a long coat. As soon as I saw him, my heart dropped to my stomach, and I got an instant sense of dread. I rushed down the rest of the hallway and pushed my way past him. As I approached my parents' door, I noticed a dark liquid coming out from under, and I quickly realized that it was blood. I swung their door open and saw them, or what was left of them. They were ripped to shreds, and their blood was all over the room. All of a sudden, my view of the room changed, and I was seeing the scene from the top right corner of the room. I could see my body standing in the doorway, the Hat Man behind me, their mangled bodies on the bed, and at the foot of the bed, a creature. This thing was a demon. This creature had long claws coming from its fingers, and it was covered in their blood. It turned its head to look at my body standing in the doorway. Then I woke up. I woke up in a cold sweat. My black lab was watching my door with concern, and I was terrified. I slowly got out of bed and walked into the hallway. My dog walked beside me, and I kept my eyes on the floor. When I got halfway down the hall, I finally looked up, but the Hat Man wasn't there. I kept walking, and when I reached their door, I looked at the floor looking for the blood. There was none. I opened their door, and even though it was dark, I swear to this day, I saw a shadow figure about the size of the demon. The creature moved and disappeared out of the corner of my eye. My heart stopped beating, and I quickly turned their light on. I looked around their room, and it was normal. No blood, and my parents were groggily awoken from the sudden light. My mom asked me what I was doing. Being 12 years old, I was a little embarrassed by having to ask to sleep with them because of a dream. But I was so terrified that I asked. My mom told me what I already knew. I was too old to be sleeping in my parents' bed because of a dream. Still, she saw how scared I was, and she agreed to let me stay with them for the night. Nothing else happened, and I slept fine the rest of the night. It took me months to tell someone, but I finally told my sister. My brother is 5 years younger than me, so I never told him. But one night, my brother woke me up because he had a nightmare. He said he saw a tall man with a top hat standing in his doorway. He was just as scared as me, but his dream wasn't nearly as gruesome as mine. I didn't tell my parents about the dream until a year ago, even though I've never been able to shake it. Ever since that night, I've had a constant feeling of being watched, and even when no other person is with me, I don't feel alone. I'm still confused and looking for answers. I don't know if it makes me feel better or worse to know that other people have seen this hat man. I still don't know what the demon or creature was, and I haven't seen it since. That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks for listening to the D.E.A.D podcast. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the D.E.A.D podcast. Also, feel free to send in your stories, episode suggestions, or feedback at the D.E.A.D podcast 1@gmail.com or send me a DM on Instagram. Also, be sure to check out the D.E.A.D podcast merch. The link is in the show notes. If you enjoyed this show, please rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on, and be sure to come back next week for my next episode.